Isla Redgrave hadn't planned to be seen that morning. The trip to Santa Ynez was meant to be a retreat, not the kind curated for social media, but a quiet departure from the sound of everything. She had driven up alone in her silver hybrid, windows down, scarf trailing behind her like something from a different life. There was no assistant, no stylist, no call scheduled. She had packed only a weekend bag with 2 paperbacks, a hand-stitched journal, and a linen dress that still smelled faintly of cedar from the back of her closet. She arrived just after sunrise, when the beach still held the cold from night. The sand was wet and dense underfoot, the tide low and whispering. She kicked off her sandals at the edge of the path, letting her feet sink into the coolness, her shoulders relaxing in a way they hadn't in weeks. Her tote, the now recognizable as ever-woven carryall, dangled casually from her arm. It wasn't intentional branding. It was just the only bag she'd bothered to bring. Far across the dunes, hidden behind a thicket of sea pine, a photographer adjusted his lens without expectation. He hadn't come for Isla. His assignment had been something entirely different. A mid-tier influencer rumored to be meeting a controversial investor. But when Isla stepped into frame, wind tousling her hair, dress billowing in the soft breeze, he didn't hesitate. He recognized a story when he saw one. He clicked once, then again, then 20 more times. Each frame captured something unguarded, something unusually rare, a public woman with no performance. Isla didn't notice. She walked the full stretch of the beach with deliberate slowness, eyes on the water, the tide foaming gently at her ankles. When she returned to the small cottage she had rented, she brewed a pot of jasmine tea and settled into the garden to read, unaware that her presence had already begun echoing beyond the cove. The next morning, Jules knocked on the screen door with hesitation. He held a tablet, his expression somewhere between panic and disbelief. Without speaking, he turned the screen toward her. Isla blinked at the image now circling online. Her, mid-step, the linen dress catching the wind, the ocean a soft blur. Behind her, the headline read, Isla Redgrave's effortless summer look. Has the queen of quiet just changed fashion again? She stared at it for a long moment, then set her tea down without a word. The photo wasn't planned, but it had begun. Julian Carr stood in the center of the As Ever downtown studio, gripping a printout of the now viral beach photo between his fingers. He turned it slowly, examining every curve of wind, every grain of soft shadow. It wasn't just a picture. It was a pivot point. He had seen trends before, seen how fast the tide of public favor could turn, but this moment felt different. It wasn't because Isla Redgrave had been photographed. It was because she hadn't intended to be, and that, in itself, had made her more visible than ever. He walked the length of the studio, murmuring quick directives to the digital team. By noon, they had crafted a subtle campaign page on the As Ever site, featuring the same linen dress, re-released with minimal edits, and marked as the unscripted drop. He didn't need approval. He knew Isla wouldn't call it exploitation. She would call it redirection. Across the coast, Isla remained tucked in her cottage, phone buzzing quietly on the counter while she stood barefoot in the small tiled shower, letting water rinse the weight of the morning headlines from her skin. She hadn't responded to the stylists who had tagged her or the publicists asking for comment. She hadn't responded to Thomas either, though she had seen his message, short, restrained, just a link to the article and a single sentence. You look at peace. She wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a reminder. Meanwhile, in New York, Thomas Alden sat across from Benedict Rain in a quiet corner booth of a dimly lit hotel lounge. Benedict was scanning live data on a tablet, frowning slightly as he relayed the sudden resurgence in Isla's fashion influence. Thomas tapped a finger absently against the side of his glass and asked if the palace was watching. Benedict nodded, carefully but closely. Isla's choices, even when unintentional, were still part of the story. Thomas leaned back, staring up at the glass chandelier above. He had always admired her sense of timing, not calculated, but instinctive. Now, even silence seemed to serve her better than the loudest campaigns. He wondered what she felt when she saw that photo. If it stirred something. If it hurt. Back in the cottage, Isla finally picked up her phone. She scrolled through the comments, paused at one from a small fashion blogger. We forgot she was this human. Then she opened her notebook and began sketching a sandal strap, a softened hem, a scent profile for a beach balm that didn't yet exist. She wasn't chasing the moment. She was shaping it gently, without force, like wind-folding waves without ever needing to roar. Inside the glass-walled offices of As Ever's headquarters, the mood had shifted from cautious optimism to breathless momentum. The viral image had done more than move product. It had resurrected a brand narrative that had nearly collapsed under too many pivots. Julian Carr stood before the creative team with a digital mood board projected behind him. Natural fibers, muted color palettes, shoreline textures, and a single anchoring photo. Isla, windlit and unaware, the photo that started it all. He instructed the team to build around that feeling, not luxury, not aspiration, but honest ease. The kind of beauty people don't know they're witnessing until it's already changed something inside them. They all nodded. The production line was prepped. The website was restructured. A campaign was being shaped around absence, the power of being seen when one hasn't asked to be. But outside that controlled space, trouble had begun to simmer. A former junior staffer dismissed 6 months earlier for violating internal confidentiality had sold a tip to a mid-level gossip site. The claim was simple and insidious. The beach photo wasn't candid. It had been staged. The leak included a blurry screenshot of an old meeting calendar where the word Santa Ynez appeared beside Isla's initials. The implication, the whole moment had been orchestrated to save the brand. Within hours the story spread. On social media, debates ignited. Was Isla a master of soft image manipulation, or was she simply navigating survival in a brutal media ecosystem? Had As Ever calculated the moment, or had the public, desperate for authenticity, simply turned coincidence into myth? In Montecito, Isla sat with Jules in the kitchen, their laptops open, notifications pinging every few seconds. She read the article slowly, calmly, without speaking. Jules asked if they should issue a rebuttal. She shook her head. Then she walked into the sunroom and stood barefoot on the tile, her eyes tracing the horizon line beyond the garden wall. Meanwhile, in London, Thomas Alden was seated in a private library with his sister's advisor, a man known for precision and cold strategy. The advisor asked whether Thomas was ready to officially distance himself from Isla's growing public story. The beach photo, the speculation, the attention, it all created tension, subtle but building. Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened the photo again. Isla mid-step, turned away, unknowingly surrounded by the entire weight of a narrative she had never asked to carry. He wondered whether she was tired, whether she was hurting. Then he turned off the screen and closed his eyes, as if silence could hold what words could no longer fix. The morning air in Montecito hung heavier than usual, the fog rolling off the sea in slow, uncertain sheets. Isla Redgrave stood near the arched doorway of her greenhouse, barefoot again, fingers lightly grazing a row of newly planted lemon balm. It had been 3 days since the staged photo accusation caught fire, and still she had made no public comment. She had spoken to no press, granted no interviews. She had not written a caption, not even posted a sunset. Inside the house, Jules sat cross-legged on the floor of her study, laptop open, earbuds in, relaying updates from Julian and the crisis team. The internet was doing what it always did, turning on itself. Some defended her, citing her track record of transparency. Others accused her of calculated authenticity, branding her the queen of quiet manipulation. Neither side interested Isla anymore. The storm would eat itself soon enough. But something else lingered now, something she couldn't quite shake. It was Thomas. He had sent another message, this one longer than before. He hadn't asked her to deny the rumors. He hadn't offered comfort. He had only written about memory. About the first time he saw her barefoot on that very beach, long before linen dresses and branded totes, before the world carved narratives out of their silences. He reminded her how she had once said stillness was a kind of rebellion. He ended the message by saying he hoped she still believed that. She hadn't replied yet. She wasn't sure if she would. But the words had followed her into her garden, into her dreams, into the mirror where she saw a woman the world mistook for strategic, when all she'd done was pause long enough to be seen. That evening, she walked alone to the shoreline again, this time wearing a thicker wrap and no hat. No one followed. No cameras appeared. It was just wind and tide, seaweed tangled at her ankles, and the moon rising quietly over the Pacific. Far away, in a room dimly lit by lamplight and reflection, Thomas Alden watched the online conversations continue without him. Benedict Raines stood nearby, advising him to issue a simple statement not in her defense, just a gesture of stability. Thomas didn't move. He remained still, hands in his lap, eyes on the quiet screen. Then he spoke not to Benedict, but more to the space itself. He said that maybe not every silence needed to be filled, and in Montecito, as the waves pulled back and Isla stood barefoot in the dark, she decided something quietly, without ceremony. She wouldn't correct the story. She would simply live past it.